By now, you've probably heard that former President Joe Biden was diagnosed, according to a statement, with prostate cancer. Now, when I say according to a statement, that's actually sort of an important distinction in this case because they say he was just diagnosed with this form of cancer, but that's actually something that is coming under a cloud of suspicion, even from non political physicians who look at what the Biden team is saying, what the Biden camp is saying in a statement, and they just are casting doubt on how likely it is that the Biden story is the real story about when the Biden team, when Joe Biden himself was diagnosed, and what was known about his medical condition when he was president. So let's start with this clip of urologist Dr. David Schusterman on News Nation reacting immediately after the news broke just on Sunday about Biden's diagnosis.
It's very unlikely that someone could get annual checkups and not notice a PSA elevation over the past, you know, but this is what I typically would see in a VA hospital where a patient hasn't had medical attention in 10 years, presents to an emergency room with bone pain, and then they find that it's metastatic prostate cancer. But in the modern age of medicine, especially the fact that he was a former president, he had intensive, state of the art, care where we can see prostate cancer, 10 years in the past. So this is, it's very unusual to hear that someone has prostate cancer where they're annually being followed up, and the fact that we just find it at a Gleason 9 is just pretty much unheard of in this day and age of medicine.
So the quote is he most likely had it for a long time. Aggressive prostate cancer grows over a long period of time, 5 to 10 years in the most aggressive form. He is a former president, had intensive state of the art care. It's unusual to hear that someone has prostate cancer when they're annually being followed up. The fact that we find it at a Gleason 9, so that's the scale, is unheard of. It's a there are other doctors too. So Zeke Emanuel was on Morning Joe, talking about it this morning as well, casting doubt on how likely the Biden story is to be true. There is Yale professor. This was one that I saw just yesterday. This is Yale professor Howard Furman, who posted, he's a doctor, quote, "It is inconceivable that this was not being followed before he left the presidency." That's Biden. Gleason grade 9 would have had an elevated PSA level antigen test for some time before the diagnosis, and he must have had a PSA test numerous times before. This is odd. So Howard Foreman, doctor, professor at Yale, and I think that's a useful perspective. Echoes what we heard on News Nation. And again, these are not, sort of right wing hacks. You can't really call these guys right wing hacks who are looking at the reality of Joe Biden getting this diagnosis 5 months after he left office, exactly 5 months. So we're May 19th. So May 20th, it'll be exactly 5 months, and saying this is one of the most medically analyzed human bodies on the face of the earth, and to suddenly have metastasized cancer, again metastasized into the bone, right now in May, seems really unlikely that nobody was aware of this when he was president of the United States. And so this obviously comes in the broader context of the ongoing discussion centered in the last week around the new book from Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson. We talked about it on the show last week, called Original Sin, that reports out inner details of a cover up within Biden's camp about his state of, let's say, mental health, not even mental, is mental and physical, mental and physical well being while he was president of the United States. Not just while he was running for president, though that's what most of the conversation centers on, and I think wrongly, but when he was literally the commander in chief, the president of the United States, leader of the free world, and all of that. So this is to say, the cover up question is now becoming more and more significant. Biden was on The View recently. We played the clip here, seeming completely just like he was when he was president, by the way, completely incapable of getting through a single interview without kind of whispering and sounding incoherent, unable to kind of put together a logical sentence without meandering and bumping around. And then Axios, obviously Alex Thompson, who wrote Original Sin, published Alex Thompson's at Axios. They published the audio of Special Counsel Robert Hur's infamous interview in October of 2023 with Joe Biden. That dropped just in the last couple of days as well. And in the video, it's exactly, I mean, it's just like what I was saying with The View. It is the exact same Joe Biden that we knew in public view for at least the last couple of years of his presidency. I would argue longer, but he's whispering. He can't remember dates. He just seems out of it, and he just seems unwell. You can listen to a clip of that here.
I don't know. This is what, 2017, 18, that area?
Yes, sir.
Remember, in this time frame, my son is either been deployed or is dying. And so it was, and by the way, there were still a lot of people at the time when I got out of the Senate that were encouraging me to run in this period.
So it is beyond obvious that Joe Biden's health was being covered up when he was president of the United States. We could talk for hours about why. We could talk about why Democrats never had a competitive primary, how this was allowed to happen. We could do that. We have done that. But I just want to say, I mean, everyone's having that conversation right now. I want to say this is really frustrating because now what I'm seeing is reporters in the legacy media, think of like a Casey Hunt, starting to grill Biden world on this alleged cover up. I'm not even going to say alleged, this clear cover up of Biden's health. And it's like they're LARPing as serious reporters who are suddenly turning the screws to Democrats, who are suddenly asking really tough questions and establishing their bona fides as hardcore truth-telling journalists. And I'm really sick of it. And I think the only reason we're actually having this conversation right now, there's the news hook of the book, and there's the news hook now of the cancer diagnosis and the Robert Hur audio. But the reason that we're seeing legacy media start to really, really cover this story tough is because Joe Biden is out of office and out of power. And now the reason that it's frustrating is because the story doesn't matter as much. I think it still matters. I think it's absolutely still newsy. That's why we're here and talking about it, because there are a lot of people who are vying for power and who are still in power. Think of like a Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader. But there are people who want to run for president. Pete Buttigieg, who is a member of the Joe Biden cabinet. There are people who were close to Biden world, within Biden world, who may someday want to be in positions of power, or again, like Chuck Schumer, in positions of power now, who you have to assume knew this was more serious than they were letting on publicly. The reporting in the book suggests that. Reporting from the Wall Street Journal suggests that it's true. People were talking about this, and it just didn't get reported, partially because reporters were successfully bullied by the White House. The White House had a great bullying campaign threatening people's access if they took this story seriously, which, going back to 2019, we talked about this on the show last week. Even Nate Silver was saying in 2019, when he was writing for ABC News, that this is Biden's biggest liability, age. Biden's biggest liability was age. People have gone back and looked up videos of Joe Biden for 2020 that everyone seems to have forgotten because it was the middle of the pandemic. But Democrats who wanted to defeat Biden in the primary at the time were dancing around this question of his age because he was still saying crazy stuff. He said crazy stuff throughout his whole career, but this seemed to be very clearly more related to age. It seemed to be a product of senility. And again, you have to armchair diagnose it because you can't trust politicians to be honest, about if they have some type of serious health issue, if they want to be in positions of power and they think they can get away with not telling you, they're going to get away with not telling you. They're going to try to get away with not telling you. That appears to be what happened with Joe Biden. But listen, now this story is not about the sitting president of the United States or the man running for president of the United States. It's about a former president. And it is no coincidence that now the media is taking it very, very seriously. Their excuse is we have new reporting, and all of a sudden this information is coming out. The thing that drives me insane about Jake Tapper is that he acts as though there was just no way to tell this story with the detail that is in Original Sin before the election, because Biden's inner circle was lying to everyone else. They were lying to the press, he said on CNN last week. So how could the press was being told something? How could they possibly have known? Well, it's the press didn't have to run all of the stories about cheap fakes. There were some cheap fakes, but not all of the videos going around of Joe Biden were cheap fakes. And to blow up that narrative disproportionate to the actual matter of edited videos was always silly, because everyone could see with their own two eyes. Joe and Mika came back from a meeting with Joe Biden and said he was as sharp as they'd ever seen him on Morning Joe shortly after. We were getting we were getting statements like that from people around Joe Biden all of the time. He's sharp. I talked to him. He's fine. The media absolutely sat on it. Jake Tapper himself has said, I look back on this now with humility. Should have done more. And it's so easy to say that now. It's so easy to say that and not actually learn the lessons. And it's just driving me nuts to see all of these legacy media outlets suddenly take the story seriously. And I just wanted to say that because we're going to see that more and more in the days ahead. People grilling Biden world, and it's going to go viral and all of that stuff. It's just driving me crazy, because this should have been a serious story back in 2019 and 2020. It shouldn't have just been Nate Silver talking about it, and it shouldn't just have been you Democrats dancing around it politely. Joe Biden was clearly in escalating stages of senility. There were obvious risks to that man having the nuclear code. If you are a military family member and you now know that in all likelihood Joe Biden had cancer and wasn't being honest about it, I should say, when he was running for president and when he was president. I mean, that's the part that really should get you, and I'm sure it does. The commander-in-chief, the man who is in charge of the military, that your sons and daughters and brothers and sisters and moms and dads and friends are putting their life on the line to serve. The commander-in-chief is so obsessed with his own power, keeping up his own image, that he is staying in office. The people around him are telling him to stay in office and protecting him staying in office, even though he is senile. He can't answer a single question in a debate without going off track and sounding bananas. He couldn't get through that interview with Robert Hur without the special counsel declining to even go after him, because he was a well-meaning elderly man with memory issues. And that is the guy who is clinging to the nuclear codes and the people around him. And by the way, to his position as commander-in-chief, the man who's in charge of the American military, who's in charge of protecting your sons and daughters, who is passing and signing legislation, who oversaw the largest net migration since the Ellis Island days, according to David Leonhardt of the New York Times, under whose watch people like Laken Riley were killed. I mean, this is insane. And the media wants to be taken seriously now for asking tough questions after he is out of power, after his family is out of power, and now that he is ailing. And Jake Tapper sort of gave everyone permission to talk about it because he wrote a book as like the dean of corporate media from his perch at CNN. It's just really frustrating, and I think it's tempting to applaud people who are asking good questions now, because sometimes there are really good questions being asked, like, hey, Pete Buttigieg, what the hell did you know? Did you not see this man up close? Were you not hearing from donors who were concerned? We now know that there was some scuttlebutt just in the last couple of years. Did you not see that man in 2020 saying crazy stuff and have that pit in your stomach, and you just didn't say anything? Like, I would love to know that. I think that speaks to the character of people who served in the cabinet, people like Chuck Schumer, who presumably spent time around Joe Biden. I think that's important. I get it. And it's tempting to be like, nice question, great work. But it's really so much easier for them to do now. And I see basically no evidence that, first of all, there's been no repercussions for journalists who didn't run stories. That's part of actually a claim in Original Sin, the book, is that it wasn't just the Wall Street Journal that had a story about Biden's health. There are other people sitting on it. The White House was bullying people out of doing it. So again, it's so easy to do right now. And that's what, I just wanted to put that out there because in this in this this new exploration, because of the book, because Biden has made his foray back into public life. He was on The View recently. As we mentioned earlier, he gave a speech recently. And now we have this very sad cancer diagnosis. And by the way, I've always thought that what was happening to Joe Biden was sad. It was hard to watch from 2019. It was hard to watch in 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and it's hard to watch in 2025 on The View with his wife, who seems to be in great health, sitting there having to complete his thoughts because he is so muddled. It feels like he is being trotted out by people who should know better, and by people who should love him and should just want to stop embarrassing him because now this is Joe Biden's legacy. He is the man who did not relinquish power until he fell apart in a debate just months before the election after the primary was basically over. That's what Joe Biden's legacy is now. A man who almost couldn't make it through his presidency because he was so senile. A man who is credibly accused of covering up his poor health. That's how everyone is always going to remember Joe Biden, and it didn't have to be that way. And people who loved him could have done what they should have done. They could have done this. They could have talked him out of it. They could have realized. I don't know that he was actually even of sound enough health to make the decision about whether or not to run for president again, whether or not to step down from office. And it's just sad to watch a man ail in front of you in a way that feels exploitive by the people around him who are benefiting from him being in power because he's sort of always been that source of power for them. It was hard to watch. It was shameful. It was embarrassing to be an American and to have that be your president on the world stage. And this is, again, we can talk about Donald Trump later. I've said plenty about Donald Trump too. There are plenty of things he does that range from hilarious, annoying, infuriating, at the same time on the world stage. But for Joe Biden, I mean, it just felt like a metaphor for an enfeebled country. And he made a lot of consequential decisions that had real effects on people's lives. And it sure looks selfish as hell with the benefit of retrospect. And it looked like that at the time. And there are a lot of people right now who are jumping on this bandwagon who didn't have the courage to do it. And they want you to give them pats on the back now. They didn't have the courage to do it at the time. I remember last summer right here, we did a video where it was again the similar like very visceral frustration about how the invocation of the 25th Amendment wasn't even being talked about. It's a double standard, of course, because there was this chatter about Donald Trump being unfit for office and the 25th Amendment being invoked against Donald Trump by people in his inner circle. But Donald Trump, whatever you say about the guy, his health wasn't as visibly poor as Joe Biden's was after that debate. And there was basically no conversation about invoking the 25th Amendment. It was all about, oh, he should step down. Should he step down? He should step down. It's like the guy has got access to the nuclear codes. He's in charge of the military. He's signing legislation that is affecting people's lives. He's controlling our immigration system. And we're talking about the next election. The guy is in power today, right now. That was the case for years under Joe Biden. People seem to know about it. The press seemed to be hearing about it. And I don't give him any credit for answering or for asking these questions now. It's easy. You don't have to be scared of Joe Biden. You don't have to be scared of Jill Biden. You don't have to be scared of the top Joe Biden advisors because their power comes from Joe Biden being in power. And Joe Biden's never going to be in power again. It's not like the Clintons, right? Bill Clinton leaves office and people realize that Hillary Clinton has political aspirations. So you still got to be nice to the Clintons. Or you still got to be careful around the Clintons. Similar type of thing with Barack Obama. Barack Obama is not president anymore, sure, but he's young enough that he has significant influence over the Democratic Party. People talk about his wife as a potential candidate someday, and he has this big role at Netflix where he has a lot of cultural influence, as silly as that sounds. So you still have to sort of protect your access if you're a legacy media journalist, and that's not true with the Bidens, and that's why it's easy for them to jump in and kind of ask these questions now. that's what I wanted to say. It's a sad story, not just for Joe Biden, who seems to be ailing and in the last stages of his life right now, but it is a sad story for the United States. We're just it just feels like it feels like we are enfeebled, to continue with that Biden metaphor. He did seem in those years like a symbol of America, and we don't. I can't predict where we'll be in a year or two. Hopefully we won't. Hopefully we can, feel better about ourselves as a country. And I mean that apolitically. Hopefully, but uh, Joe Biden really was an embarrassment on the world stage, and I don't say that in a way that reflects on Joe Biden's voters, because if you're a Joe Biden voter, you were caught between, for a lot of people, what felt like a rock and a hard place. There are people who voted for Biden, then swung back for Trump. That's a sort of different conversation, and sure, plenty of people will have it, but people also didn't have the right information that the media should have been bringing to them about the scuttlebutt among donors and insiders before the campaign even started. Before the campaign even started in earnest. So it should have been coming at then, because it would have pressured the Democrats to have a real primary. So just it's really frustrating to watch this happen now. Watch journalists jump all over the story now, and act like brave truth tellers. And that's what I wanted to say today. Thanks for tuning in. Undercurrents.tv is where you can go to get a premium subscription to the show. You can get weekly emails, a private email address to talk to us, and of course, premium paywalled episodes of the show there. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll be back here with more Undercurrents soon.